typically, when we see something ambiguous, we'll recognize it. We'll say, okay, this is unusual. This is unclear. It may be uncharted territory that nobody has navigated before. But if you're just starting out in your career, you may not be able to recognize ambiguity because you don't know what you don't know.
Welcome to Leadership and Motivation Unleashed, practical leadership for modern workplaces. A podcast where we explore actionable strategies to help you lead with confidence, build cohesive teams, and create thriving workplace cultures.
We're here for the career-focused professionals climbing the corporate ladder, the managers navigating team dynamics, and the leaders shaping the future of work. In each episode, we'll break down challenges, share practical advice, and leave you with insights you can apply today.
I'm Patrick Law, your co-host, a Gulf War veteran with over 26 years of corporate leadership experience in banking and payments, blending precision and innovation with a tad of passion to solve big challenges.
And I'm Rachel Book, a C-suite trusted advisor and an HR leader with 2 decades of experience at Fortune 50 companies, specializing in building people-first strategies and driving impactful talent solutions.
Together, Rachel and I, we combine operational expertise and transformational leadership to bring you real-world advice on leadership, workplace culture, team dynamics, career growth, and anything else that we may want to delve into.
So, if you're ready to take your career and leadership skills to the next level, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Hey there. We are excited for our topic today. This was one of the topics that we teed up in our intro about the top trends that we encounter in the workplace this year. And it's all about ambiguity. We talked about how to deal with an environment where there's a lot of gray and making sure that we actually recognize when the gray is there, right? Before we figure out how to deal with that, since that is so key. So Patrick, there's so much to talk about on this topic. You know, some things that go through my mind is that for some of us, ambiguity is kind of fun, right? It's adventurous, it's exciting. And then for others, it's really confusing and overwhelming and anxiety inducing. So I think different people react differently when they encounter ambiguity. Some people just naturally like it more or less. And sometimes the ambiguity is a short-term condition, right? It might be a period of time where things are ambiguous or blurry for specific reasons. And sometimes ambiguity is just the way it's going to be forever. So what are some of your thoughts on ambiguity in the workplace and how people should process it and deal with it?
It's such a big topic for a format like this, but I'll start with, I remember the first time I heard the word used in a corporate setting, and it was at US Bank, and it was during the housing crisis of '08. Where were you in '08, Rachel?
In '08, I was at AT&T. And I mean, the world was the iPhone in our space. So I think we were a little insulated from the housing crisis.
Yeah, for sure. Like the fact that you were, I think I've said it on this podcast before, but Rachel was key to the talent attraction of building the first iPhone. She's very famous, if you guys didn't know that.
Oh, I don't know about that.
You are. Anyway, yeah, you were definitely insulated. But at the bank, we were a bank. And what was the housing crisis? A mortgage crisis, right? So it was very scary for a lot of people because banking at the time, and I joined US Bank in '05 after the company I was with was acquired by them to fortify their payments businesses because they loved Richard Davis, the CEO, loved hedging net interest margin. And banks run on net interest margin, right? It's almost the center of the universe. Depending on what kind of banker you're talking to, they may argue that. But name was a big deal at US Bank. And he wanted fee income because payments businesses generate long-term contracts and it's click, 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 debit cards, credit cards, interchange, those transaction fees. They implemented SVP at the bank. And he used the word, and he was really getting us all ready for, look, this is going to be a wild ride. And it was. I mean, I don't want to over-exaggerate and say the stock market crashed, but it was ugly. There was a lot of red and a lot of down. I want to say US Bank went from $60 a share to $8 a share in like a week. It was it was scary for people. People's retirements were jacked up. Our customers were in a bad spot, personally, professionally. And he was adamant about not doing layoffs. And he just said it on a call. And I remember back then, for CEOs of that ilk to talk about those things, and there's 70,000 people working at the bank at the time. And there's a lot of us on that call. And for him to say, I don't want to do layoffs, it was like, oh man, changed overnight. And even though you're insulated from it, Rachel, this could have buried you, could have buried AT&T. Like, the lending windows closed. And you guys can go out and Google this. Money stopped moving. The system seized. Not for long, but enough that it was like, and we didn't see 1929 again, but that's because the Fed took real action. So imagine you're operating in these environments and that seismic thing happened. For those of us who are old enough in the workforce, 9/11 was a version of that. Like, air travel stopped. Like, that's a version of a mind shake that you need to be good at balancing the non-standard. And ambiguity for me is a version of gray. And at US Bank, we got really good at risk and compliance overnight because all these federal agencies started in 08 and 09 to babysit banks, credit unions, financial services, payments companies, because too big to fail came out of all that. And ambiguity became the rallying cry of the entire organization. And look, a lot of people didn't make it. Like, we took pay cuts. So I want to say it was VPs and above took a 25% haircut on our pay. And it lasted a while. And they didn't give it back to us. Even when they restored our full pay, it's not like they paid us back to 25%. It was just part of it. Richard went to $1 a year of salary.
Wow.
And I think
that's leadership.
And I think he kept it for like 2 years. Now, look, the man had a ton of stock. He wasn't hungry. He's a CEO of a Fortune 150 organization. And at the time, because so many banks failed, like overnight, US Bank went from number 9 or 10 to number 5 in the country because so many banks disappeared in a week. It's scary, right? And that ambiguity cry rallied the whole company to, okay, we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's ambiguity. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. There's no rule book. There's no sometimes rhyme or reason, at least in the moment for some of the people going through it. Now, if you shift way away from when I first heard the word ambiguity and learned to operate a little bit scared and in the gray and sometimes in the dark, and you know what? So was he probably.
People know that something is swirling, especially when there's a crisis, right? 9/11, housing crisis, COVID, right? We've all been through so much. And some of these situations are temporary, right? Thank God, right? They're temporary. It's a crisis. It moves on. And then often, right, we can revert to the clarity that we were comfortable before. But having a real leader that grounds everyone and first saying, it's okay to feel a little swirly, right? This is unfamiliar. This is uncharted territory. But then having the leaders around you to ground everyone in what you do know. Because even in situations of ambiguity, there's still some things that we can remind ourselves that we know that are realities that are staying constant, right? And so one thing I've always guided people to do if they were feeling like, hey, I'm not really sure, this is unclear, I said, well, tell me what you do know. Write a list of all the things that you know to be true and know to be real. And usually we find that there is more than we know than we think we do, which I think can help us get through that. But what about situations where the ambiguity may not be a result of a crisis or a national disaster or a situation? And ambiguity is a result of maybe sometimes poor leadership or lack of clarity, right? As a leader, how do you help others navigate those kinds of environments? Because sometimes if an industry is evolving or if a company is going through a very unique time period, or you're just in catch-up mode or you're in startup mode, things might be ambiguous forever. And some people have a hard time with that.
So that's a great follow-up, Rachel, because sometimes when I answer, I give the big, meaty examples because most people are aware of them, or if they're tenured enough in industry or whatever their trade craft is, they lived through it and had their own experiences with it. But your follow-up is brilliant because there's a lot of micro moments where being good or bad at ambiguity, lack of self-awareness, a little lack of courage in the moments could rise up. Because I do believe there's a courageousness to managing ambiguity, like being okay with it not being okay. So if you have a bad boss, I think that was one of the examples that you referenced. I may not be using the right words, but we all have experienced bad bosses. Like I've had 29 bosses in 28 years. And yes, I've counted them all and I think about them a lot. Of those 29, I've liked 5 and respected 3. So it doesn't mean they were bad people. It just means maybe it was the time of my career where I was over my skis and I thought I knew more than they did, which I probably didn't. It's just a Patrick maturity problem in the moment. Some of them are just really bad at their job. Like, I don't understand how some people get their jobs they get. Maybe they bought their way into them, or, you know, they were really great at managing up. Now, I say those borderline ugly things about how people get their jobs because I guarantee you some of our listeners know people like that. And if you're being managed by these people or led by these people and you don't respect them, that's super hard. You heard what I just said about my stats. And the hard part is staying professional and building your own culture inside a culture. I've said this on another podcast we've done, like, who are dealing with a situation that you think should be more black and white than it is, and you struggle with ambiguity or managing through ambiguity, you're going to learn real quick. So I almost see situations that aren't ideal with bosses or environments as a positive thing for growth. You won't learn how to manage through ambiguity, bad boss, bad environment, bad this, whatever, unless you experience it. How are you supposed to learn unless you get the experience? So for the people who want to complain about their boss or the company they work for and you're not going to do anything about it, like leave, use it as an opportunity to practice your professionalism, building your own environment inside the environment so the people around you can have some enjoyment. Because if you're struggling, the people around you are probably struggling too. Maybe they don't have the courage to talk about it. And that's an ambiguous situation. Well, my boss is this, but I'm doing this. Yeah. As long as you remain professional and you salute sharply and you manage the outcome people seek the right way. Don't do anything unethical or untowards, but you can create an outcome that the boss seeks the way you know the environment needs to chase it. That's a version of ambiguity. Like, do you have the courage to march ahead anyway and not get bogged down in the nonsense from above you or next to you and execute efficiently? That's a version of managing an environment that may not be ideal. And I call that ambiguity. Like, you have to be able to manage your way through that. I've seen a lot of careers derailed, a lot. I know a lot more people who didn't make it than made it because of this topic. If you can't manage the gray and feel your way through that by being confident in your own skill sets. So I know I kind of veer in my dialogue about ambiguity, but I think it's all related. Like, it is a personal choice to drive through the noise and to stay focused.
And it's usually worth it.
Yeah. If something's not perfect or it's not dress right dress or not everyone's marching in unison, help everyone around you get through that. Yeah. That's a way to deal with ambiguity too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would add maybe a couple of nuances here. So one thing that might be interesting is think about people like us who've been around for a while. You know, we've seen a lot, we've dealt with a lot, you know, both good and bad. And so typically when we see something ambiguous, we'll recognize it. We'll say, okay, this is unusual. This is unclear. It may be uncharted territory that nobody has navigated before. But if you're just starting out in your career, you may not be able to recognize ambiguity because you don't know what you don't know. And so one piece of advice I would offer before you plow through it or before you freak out is ask someone. Say, hey, this seems ambiguous to me, or I'm not really sure what I'm seeing here, or is this typical, or have we dealt with this before, or is there a playbook, right? Asking those questions can really help you understand, okay, is this one of these situations where I just need to be brave and bold and charge through, or am I missing something? And maybe it's ambiguous because I don't know what I don't know. And so that's a piece of self-awareness that I think is really important. This is also where we can utilize each other, right? All our brains work so differently based on our strengths, based on our talents, based on our experiences, based on how we've lived life. And so something that's ambiguous to one of us might be very clear to someone else. And so here's where I would say, phone a friend, right? Reach out to your network, both inside and outside your company, and get guidance on what am I missing, right? This seems ambiguous. This is blurry. I'm not really sure how to deal with this. What do you think? Other people have different perspectives. Some people zoom in, some people zoom out. Sometimes when you're so close to a situation, things can seem very unclear. And so I think finding a partner to help clarify it for you can be really grounding and making sure that we're not letting our biases get in the way. So I think those are some of the ways that maybe we can address these situations that come up. So a couple of takeaways. When you encounter ambiguity, first consider, is this situational or is this forever? Is this because of something that's going on in the world, right? Is this a temporary issue? Is it permanent? Is it based on a worldwide event? Or is it just maybe a symptom of poor leadership, right? So understanding what's causing the ambiguity can help you figure out how to deal with it and also help you decide if you want to. You might be a person that says, this is really not fun for me, right? I'm a person that needs more clarity in how I go about things. And sometimes that could be the nature of the job itself. Some jobs have more structure and have more predictability than others. And then some cultures and some environments have more predictability than others. So I would say, figure out what works for you. But first, do a little exercise to understand the type of ambiguity that you're dealing with. And then once you know the ambiguity, figure out, document what it is you know, right? And then you can fill in the blanks, probably with the help of other people. What are some takeaways from you, Patrick?
I think you nailed it. I would reinforce what I said earlier about be courageous, meaning
yes,
be bold enough to look at yourself first. You should always look at yourself first. Don't look around you and say, it's my boss's fault. It's the company's fault. It's my peer's fault. What are you doing about it?
Yeah.
What are you doing to manage through whatever it is you're managing through? And I don't mean managing people. You manage yourself first. If you don't have yourself square and understand what your emotional intelligence capabilities are or where you lack and being honest with yourself about it to work on it, you don't see what the landscape is doing to you from an ambiguous perspective, ask yourself why that is. Like if you hear this podcast and you're like, I don't even know what that means, start with yourself and go find out. Drop us a note.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you. We don't even need to know you. You want to talk to us about what we were just talking about? I'm happy to go deeper with anybody. People I know, people I don't know. But the courageousness part isn't just filling a void or filling a vacuum of leadership or engagement or driving in an organization. It's where are you on your leadership journey with regards to ambiguity and self-awareness? Be courageous enough to ask yourself that question and be honest in what you hear from yourself and be bold enough to ask others. There's all kinds of tools you can just get for free that help you with self-awareness and to drive through ambiguity in what you're dealing with day to day. Do that.
It's not as scary as you think. And if you're dealing with ambiguity now, you will probably have to deal with it again. So get good at it, right?
That's right.
Awesome. Thanks for a great conversation.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for tuning in to Leadership and Motivation Unleashed. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and review. It only takes 1 minute and it helps the show grow and reach more leaders like you in search of advice and motivation.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Please remember to share with your friends and family and coworkers, mentors, trusted advisors. This show is for everybody. See you next time.